Hello, welcome. So, we are here for a January and February wrap-up. I don't know why, but I just wasn't feeling it for January. So, we are talking about, I think, 24 books today. So, I have tried to kind of organize them in a way that at least moderately makes sense. So, we are starting out with literary books. And first up, we have This Accident of Being Lost. And this is a collection of kind of fragments, poetry stories. This is an indigenous author. She is Anishinaabeg, and she lives in Canada. And I have read one of her books before, Islands of Decolonial Love, and these are very, very similar formats. So they are both kind of stories and songs is what they are called, and I loved both of these. She is such an incredible author. I actually did prefer Islands of Decolonial Love, and I would suggest reading that first if possible, just because I think it is a little bit more, I don't know, beginner friendly or something like that. This one I think required a little bit more letting things go by without understanding them, at least for me. But again, loved this. Definitely want to read her other works. Then I read At the Bottom of the River, which was the first selection for the Jamaica Kincaid read-along. And this is a collection of short stories, and I also absolutely loved this. At the beginning, for probably the first 60% of the book, it is very short, but I was into it, but I also was lost, clueless, wandering about in the forest, but it really came together for me at the end. I assume this was the first one that she wrote, given that we read it first, and I think it was kind of maybe a flexing of the writing muscle, maybe, where a lot of the stories I did not understand at all, but they were beautiful, like really, really incredible writing, very kind of shocking in some ways, and, just beautiful passages, very, very evocative, very rich. And then the last 3 or 4 stories I thought actually made sense to me for one thing. Not that that should be, a demand of mine, but it does help sometimes. Really great. I am excited to read more of her work. I did not get to the pick for this month, which is Annie John, yet, but hopefully I do have it out from the library, so hopefully I will read that soon. Next up, I read these 3 books by Ottesta Moshfegh, and I do have a reading vlog about this, so I will very rapidly go through these, hopefully with a little bit more clarity now that I've had a week to think about them. So the first book that I read was Death in Her Hands, and this is one of her more recent books, and I really did not like this that much. We are following an older woman who has been widowed, and she moves to a lake cottage, and she becomes obsessed with figuring out the origins of this note that was left outside. And you're just following along in her mind, kind of. And yeah, this one just didn't fulfill any purpose for me, and I didn't feel like I gained anything from it. So yeah, not a bad read, but I wouldn't recommend it. And next I read Eileen, which is a story about a 24-year-old girl working in a boys' prison who is, very dissatisfied with her life. It's set in the 60s, and she does end up running away from home after getting involved in a very, very bizarre situation at her work, and things kind of getting out of hand. So she's narrating that story to us, I think 50 years later. So this one was much, much more enjoyable. I really, really liked this book. All of Ottesta Moshfegh's characters are highly questionable at best. So our narrator does have a lot of very deep-seated issues. So that can be difficult to read from sometimes if that's not something that you're used to or interested in. So I certainly wouldn't recommend this book or this author to everyone, but I do think that it is very, very interesting how she kind of navigates that. Also, this one, my pet fan theory, I was telling my friend on Instagram, hello if you're watching, is that this is a an unhinged retelling, like a dark retelling of The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith, which was adapted into the movie Carol. I mean, if you've read it, tell me what you think about this theory, because I think there's something there. And lastly, for that video, I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, and this was my favorite of the three. I really, really enjoyed this. So you are following this very, very wealthy, very privileged girl in her 20s or something in New York City who is very, very depressed, and she decides to just try to sleep for a year, basically, to try to be kind of reborn. And so she gets, as much medication as she can in order to facilitate this, and you're just kind of following her as she tries to carry on this journey. There are, other characters and everything, things do happen. Not a lot of things, but some things. And I just found this very, very relatable in some ways, obviously not in most ways, but I think it depicts mental health in a very, it kind of carries things to the extreme so that you can see the less extreme, if that makes any sense. It very much exposes the thoughts and feelings of someone in that position who also, alongside of that, is a pretty problematic and also self-centered person. So, yeah, I did really like this. I also read The Employees by Olga Ravin. Maybe. This was recommended to me by Toby at Toby's Book Corner, and I absolutely loved it. I read it from the library first, and I had to buy a copy because I highlighted so many things in the ebook, and I just really wanted to be able to reread this. It is, a very, very short read, so easily rereadable. This is kind of a sci-fi speculative story centered around the workers on a spaceship mission. And that sounds very heavy sci-fi, but it is not. It is told in the format of HR witness statements, basically. So interviews. So they're just numbered statements, and some of them, as you can see, are a sentence, and some of them are pages. And so on this ship there are both humans and humanoids, and they have kind of a complicated relationship with each other, and that is something that evolves throughout this. They are also gathering objects on this mission, and none of this makes any sense at the beginning. So you start this and it's just basically nonsense, but a kind of story or cohesive themes and threads, come together as you read more and more of these statements, and it is such a powerful statement on capitalism, on work, and the kind of adaptive behaviors that people develop in order to survive in a working environment. This was surprisingly beautiful. It also is very gross. If you have trypophobia or whatever it's called, the fear of holes and bumps, which I totally have, not to a clinical level, but they weird me out so much. This exploits that, so be prepared to skip over certain parts because it's a theme in here, but it is skippable, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to read this one passage really quickly. So I'm skipping around a little bit, but you can't say I absconded from the lab because at that time we were allowed to go out on our own. I came out of one of the first pods, but certainly I may have gone further than I knew they were comfortable with. There wasn't a person or anything similar in sight for miles around, and as I climbed one of the hills and looked out over the woods, the ducks suddenly came flying in arrow formation from beyond the trees and passed above my head. They were quacking loudly as they flew, and I breathed in deeply. I stored that landscape inside me forever. The only thing I think about now is that day. The day I experienced something that wasn't part of the program. The day when everything was mine alone. Not a true parallel, but this reminded me of, strangely, when I worked in retail, I was being trained by this woman, and we worked the closing shift, and so she at one point calls me up to the front on our little headset things, and the store faced west, and so the entire front was glass and you could see the beautiful sunsets out the front door. And so there was this incredible, shocking pink and orange sunset, and she was like, every day you need to come up here and look at this because, you know, it's like the only thing we have, or like basically you just need something to get you through. And that was just a terrible job. You know, we were all treated so badly, and that woman was fired within like a month of my working there for drinking on the job. So it's just always stuck with me, you know, that moment, and it just that was immediately came to mind when I read that passage. So anyway, I do highly recommend this if you like speculative works at all, and if you like any commentary on capitalism. This is a good one. Moving into kind of general fiction, miscellaneous category, we have a classic, Rebecca, or at least a classic, right? A modern classic, a classic, something. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I loved this so much. I knew that I would, but I don't think I knew how much I was gonna love it. This like pretty much got me out of a reading slump, I'm pretty sure. So this is a story of a young woman who marries this man and moves to his, you know, estate in England, and his previous wife, who died in a boating accident, is just kind of looming over them. So the previous wife is named Rebecca. She's just kind of like everywhere that they look in this house. The main character is like always trying to live up to her, but also doesn't care at all about that and just wants to like be her own little tiny mouse and carry on her life, you know. This is so dramatic. Like, truly, if you rewrote a soap opera and took out, like, you know, the wild things that happen for the most part, but kept the, like, energy of drama about it and set it in this time period, you know, it would be this book. The writing was gorgeous, in my opinion. So beautiful. I don't know how well you can see them, but that, like, puke-colored tab is for appalling behavior. And if you've read this book, you probably know who the appalling behavior is coming from, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't. I read this in the same way that I read Jane Eyre, which is probably not in the author intended way, but I maintain that I am correct, and I would love a book written to unite the two between the books. I read Anywhere You Run by Wanda M. Morris. I read All Her Little Secrets by her, I believe in December, and really, really enjoyed it. This one was slower for me, so they both had really strong premises, really good characters and setup and everything, and they both had good endings, and they both had a very, very slow middle section. So this one, I struggled to get through the middle section a little bit more, and so I actually switched at some point from the audiobook to the physical book, and it was totally fine after that. But just be aware that if you do read either of these books, if you find the middle part slow at all, you just have to push through it. So the two books are connected, but it doesn't matter really. Like, you can read them, I think, in either order. So this is telling the story of sisters Violet and Marigold, and they are growing up in Mississippi, I believe, and they have lost their parents and their other sister, and so it's just the two of them. And then things start to go down in the town that they live in. This is set in the Civil Rights era, by the way, 1964. Violet has to leave, and she has to, you know, try to run away from this situation. And yes, I do recommend it. I think it was a very good, you know, kind of thriller, historical suspense type book. I did actually, I think, like all her little secrets more for a thriller standpoint, but if you like historical settings, then definitely this one's the way to go. They both were really good, and I will continue reading anything that she comes out with. So I read 2 Parts Sugar, 1 Part Murder by Valerie Burns. I picked this up on a total whim, and I'm trying to proactively read books from Black authors and other authors of color who are writing in genres like, you know, cozy mystery or whatever. And this one looked really cute, and it was. This is the beginning, apparently, of a new series. So in this book, we are following Maddie, who was left at the altar, or like stood up. Her groom did not show up to her wedding, and so she kind of runs away. Her aunt had just passed away and left her home and business in Michigan, and so she leaves her very high-class, expensive, fancy life in LA and moves to this tiny, quaint town in Michigan and starts trying to run a bakery there. Of course, as implied, a mystery unfolds, and she has to try to solve this with the people that she has met there, and also determine if she can trust the people that she has met there. This really should have been something that I did not like at all, because it did the whole thing where people are like influencers, and it like shows you the hashtags and everything that they're using in the text, and the main character is very, very airheaded, her words, at the beginning, and so that easily could have been really annoying, and I think for some people it probably would be, but it really wasn't for me. I don't know, it fit with the book. It was okay. If it had been much more, it probably would have started to bother me, but it really didn't. So yeah, I think this was really cute, and if she does continue the series, I will probably keep reading it. I read The Tea Dragon Society, which is the first graphic novel of I think it's 3 right now, and I have wanted to read these for a really long time. I just haven't, actually gone to the trouble of getting them from the library, and I finally did, and it was so worth it. I'm now spending way too long picking out what merch I want from the website, because they have puzzles, they have pins, and this was just so dang cute that I need like art of it somewhere. So this story is also really cute, though. It's basically talking about how a lot of the like old arts are being lost. So in this story, there are little dragons, little tea dragons that are just so cute, but they grow when they are cared for properly and, bonded with someone. They grow tea leaves or flowers on their bodies, and that's how you make this special tea dragon tea. And it's kind of becoming like a lost art when the book starts, and just precious, well worth it. It took like no time at all to read, and the art was just out of this world. So, segueing us into YA, which I also have some in Spanish, but I read She Drives Me Crazy, which is a YA written in English. This was something that I saw recommended for a lesbian or woman loves women YA romance, and it was really, really cute. I have been trying to keep an open mind about romance and about YA and all of these genres that I don't normally read from, and this was really cute. It was overly long, in my opinion. Like, the middle part was unnecessarily long, and the main character was at times really frustrating, but I understand also that she's like 16 or 17 or something. So our main character is a basketball player, and she has kind of a nemesis who is the head cheerleader, and they have kind of a troubled history. Like, they have not gotten along ever. One thing leads to another, and they agree to basically fake date and, come to a mutual agreement about this. I liked that the kind of third act conflict that romance pretty much always seems to have was like reasonable. Like, a lot of times they throw in something completely wild, and this one was really just a completely understandable and fair and mature thing that they needed to work through, and it was very understandable. So yeah, I did really like this. I think if it's something that you are interested in, I think it is worth the read, and definitely worth the read for younger readers. So then in Spanish, I read El Linaje Perdido, which is the third book in a series of middle grade Spanish fantasy. Has not been translated into English. Time for more light. I'm not really going to talk about this because I've already talked about the prior books in the series, but this is a very cute series, Los Dioses del Norte. If you need easy books to read as kind of an upper beginner in Spanish, I think these are very cute. Then I listened to El Príncipe del Sol, which is a YA fantasy, which is actually written by a Mexican YouTuber, or a Mexican booktuber, and I did not know that when I started it, but this was okay. This is a fantasy about a prince whose mother, the queen, has been kidnapped. They have not been able to find her, so they have started the process of converting him into the active ruler, but he does not really want to become the ruler yet. He doesn't feel like he's ready, and obviously also he doesn't really want this to be the way that he starts ruling the kingdom. So he and his friends go on a mission to find her. I liked certain things about this. I did think the world was really interesting. I liked that the main character was kind of a coward, to be honest. Like, I think a lot of YA books make everybody out to be really brave, or they say they're not brave, but then they act brave all the time, and that was not necessarily the case here. I did like that about this. I didn't think it was a bad read. The ending did not make a lot of sense to me. Like, it just felt kind of out of the blue, and I don't know whether that was because of my Spanish or because of the book. And I have seen a lot of reviews after reading it from Spanish booktubers that it is not very well written. Like, the Spanish is not very good. So that's not good for me as a Spanish learner. So, you know, I don't think I'm going to continue the series since I didn't really love it anyway. And Sin Filtros is an Anne of Green Gables retelling. Oh, El Príncipe del Sol and Sin Filtros both have not been translated into English. So this is an Anne of Green Gables retelling. It is kind of an older YA. There is quite a bit of sexual content, so it's probably not for younger readers, but very, very endearing. It has a ton of LGBTQ plus representation, but as a diehard Anne of Green Gables fan, this did leave me a little bit disappointed in some ways. The magic was just not there, and that's just not fair to expect a retelling to have. But additionally, the character of Anne was just kind of annoying, to be honest. And not in a way that ruined the book, but not great. Like, she just as a character was just not great. And I just wish that there had been more plot. This was, you know, a romance, so obviously a lot of time is going to be dedicated to the romance element. But honestly, there just, like, was not a plot. So the plot that, you know, it sells itself on is that Anne is a fanfiction writer, you know, following a very popular, in the book, Arthurian drama, and Gilbert Blythe is a, you know, warring fanfiction author, and so they have this rivalry, and yeah, it just wasn't enough plot for the length of the book, to be honest. And yeah, again, the representation was really, really great. Gilbert is trans, Anne is bi. There's, you know, almost all of the characters are LGBTQ plus in some way. Selfishly, I did want there to be ace representation, but there was not. I did assign some people some representation in my head, but anyway, I do think it's worth the read, but not quite what I wanted. Somehow I think I let all of my batteries die at the same time. Hopefully enough battery to get us through. Okay, so Aura. I read Aura in Spanish and in English. So this is a very, very short novel by Carlos Fuentes, and it is a basically like horror story from Mexico. So we are following a writer who sees this job posting and he's like, wow, this was like made for me, goes to the place listed in the job posting to get the job, and all kinds of weirdness unfolds. I don't want to say anything else because obviously this is very short and I don't want to spoil it, but this was really interesting. If you like super weird, creepy, bizarre things, I think it's worth the read. It is, like, this is a bilingual edition, so Spanish and English, and it's, you know, it's very, very quick to read. It is disturbing for sure. I would read other things from the author, but this didn't, like, wreck my world or anything like that. Next up on the literary Spanish side, we have Las Cosas que Perdimos en el Fuego by Mariana Enriquez. This is an Argentinian author. This is a collection of horror short stories and it has been very, very popular. Things We Lost in the Fire. It is translated, and this is very, very interesting. I really, really enjoyed reading this a lot. I read it first in Spanish and then I listened to it afterwards in English, and I really was surprised by how much I did understand when I read it in Spanish, because normally I read something in Spanish and I understand the plot and I understand the vast majority of what's going on, but then I listen to it or read it in English and there's like this whole other, you know, dimension that I didn't understand, and that wasn't necessarily the case here, which was really cool. If you read in Spanish, the audiobook of this was amazing. I loved it. I loved the narrator. So she is talking about a lot of social issues, personal issues that, you know, are taking place in Argentina or around the world. And so this is a very, very wide variety of topics. There are things in here that I think are problematic. I don't know. Again, this is something I've talked about before, that I struggle because one of the stories in here is just full on about an eating disorder, and other ones, the characters are extremely anti-fat. And I think that that is due to the author and, you know, things that she wants to talk about there. And that's not always actually discussed other than the story that is very clearly about an eating disorder. So I don't know, that was something. The first story also had a kind of what we consider, at least in the US, a very outdated term for transgender people, but I also think it's possibly a cultural thing, because I saw another book by a transgender person from Argentina who used that word for themselves. And so, again, I don't know if it's something that is just a lost in cultural translation thing. I don't want to say that it's, you know, fine that she uses this word. You know, it's not my community, obviously. I can't say that. So, complicated feelings, but overall, really, really liked this. It is very disturbing, and especially the later stories, they get more, I think, disturbing. But it's also beautiful. Like, very simple writing, but very, very beautiful, I think. I really liked it, and I will be reading the rest of her work. Then I listened to Todo Esto Te Daré by Dolores Redondo. This is a crime novel. It has been translated into English. It's called, I think, All This I Will Give to You. I didn't read it in English, but this was really, really enjoyable. It is the story of a man who is a, like, author, and the police come and tell him that his husband has been killed in a car accident, and it is in a completely different part of the country than his husband told him that he was in. And so he is kind of unraveling what the reasoning was that his husband was lying to him, what actually happened to his husband, and he gets, you know, obviously drawn into this whole other situation. So I enjoyed it. I thought that the characterization of both the main character and the side characters was really, really interesting, really well done. It was way too long. Like, very long, and I don't think that the plot required it. It wasn't that it was boring to listen to, it just could have been a much like sharper story, I think. But again, it could have been that I was missing something, but a lot of the reviews did say as well that it was way too long. But I will continue to read more from this author in the future. She is, I believe, a very popular crime author in Spain. Near the beginning of the year, I read two translated from English to Spanish books. I listened to the Spanish version of Spark Joy, most of it. This was kind of a palate cleanser when I was a little bit burnt out on audiobooks, and this was not a good choice because for some reason my library had this one and not the original, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. And this is like an instructional book, like it's telling you in detail how to do different things, and so it was not that fun to listen to. You know, it was fine, and I listened to up until like the last 45 minutes or something, but I did just kind of, you know, bail on that one. But I finished Babel in Spanish, and this was incredible, just as incredible the second time as it was the first time, and I do fully intend to read it yet again, but probably not until I have reread the Poppy War trilogy, which was also something that I wanted to do this year. So loved this and loved reading it in translation, because this is a book, you know, partially about translation, about language and the power of language and the power of multiple languages and the differences between them. And it just felt like kind of a privilege, not to be dramatic, but like a privilege to be reading this in translation. And I loved it so much. I did read this in English in December, so if you want more thoughts, then that is, you know, there. I do not think that the hype has been too high on this one, although, you know, obviously I always am concerned when the hype gets that high that people won't love it because of that, but I think that this one lived up to it and more. Absolutely loved this book. Highly recommend. All right, lastly, we have some nonfiction. The first nonfiction book I read this year was White Women. I got it from the library, so I don't have it here with me, but I follow the authors and their organization, which is called Race to Dinner on Instagram, and they have been really, really amazing in helping me to, you know, confront white womanhood and all of the problematic elements of that. And so when I saw that they were coming out with a book, I was very, very excited, and this book is highly recommended. I need to get my own copy and at some point reread it. It's a very short book. I think sometimes it's hard to tell, especially with nonfiction online, like if it's going to be like a big, you know, hardcover. This is a small paperback, and it is very, very manageable. It is, you know, kind of difficult to read because, you know, you are confronting things about yourself and your, you know, in-group if you are white or a white woman. But very approachable, but also not pulling any punches. And so, yeah, I highly, highly recommend it. I think more so even than the content of the book, because they say themselves, you know, in the beginning of the book, like, you already know everything that we're about to tell you in this book. But I think more so than even the content of the book was analyzing my own reactions to it. You know, what made me defensive, something that I noticed that I was doing occasionally with stories in the book was that I would occasionally get the urge to like gaslight or argue. Like, I would be like, well, how do you know that was because you are not white? How do you know that situation happened? Like, that's happened to me too. So like, that might not be. And then I'm like, why am I doing that? Like, why am I bringing this question? They know what happened to them and they know the context that it took place in. And similarly, another thing that I thought about was that I was constantly relating it to my own experience as a woman, or, you know, at least someone perceived as a woman, that sometimes I felt like that was the way that I validated what they were saying. Like those cases where I felt like gaslighting, I would be like, well, I hate it when I know that someone said something to me because I'm a woman, and then someone else is like, well, how do you know that? Like, that could have been for any reason, you know? And I'm like, no, I know. And so then I was like, why am I casting doubt on them when they know also why this happened? Then, you know, peeling back another layer, I'm like, why do I have to have a parallel in my own life in order to believe them about what's going on in their lives? Like, it was just something that made me ask a lot of questions of myself that are not always comfortable questions to ask, and I highly, highly recommend it. The only issue that I had with it was that sometimes I felt like the examples that they gave were honestly too extreme. Like, sometimes they would say things like, you're not racist, you just do things like, you know, laugh at racist jokes that your family members make, or, you know, things that, like, I don't know, maybe not. But I think a lot of us who would be seeking out a book like this don't do. And so it would be something that we would maybe be able to let ourselves off the hook a little bit, because we'd be like, oh no, I would never do that, you know? I'm obviously not in any place to critique the book, and I think that they did an amazing job, but that was kind of the only, like, comment I had. Otherwise, it was incredible, and I do think that you should absolutely read it if you are white. Even if you're a white man, but obviously if you're a white woman or other. I read You Just Need to Lose Weight by Aubrey Gordon. This is the host of my all-time favorite podcast, Maintenance Phase. Well, she's the co-host. There are two hosts, but I also have her other book, which is What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. And this one just came out this January, I think, and I, again, highly, highly recommend that anybody read this. If you do listen to Maintenance Phase, a lot of this is the same stuff, you know, it's like a lot of it has been covered on the podcast, but it's still always good to get that, you know, encapsulated, get all the data together and in a, you know, cohesive format. And also Maintenance Phase is like my comfort listen. Is that weird? And so it was just nice to see all of this stuff again. So this is You Just Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths About Fat People is the subtitle. And so this is, it just literally goes through 19 myths in different categories, and talks about why they are a myth. So the first category is being fat is a choice. The second category is, but what about your health? Third, fat acceptance glorifies obesity. And fourth, fat people should ... So I think if you are someone who's interested in fat activism or body positivity, body neutrality, whatever you want to call it, this is something that you should absolutely read, because it gives you so many additional perspectives. Like, I think I have gone through, as many of us have, quite a journey. I was raised extraordinarily anti-fat, and I still have a lot of that, you know, obviously ingrained in me, and I have to be always aware of that. And, you know, then I went through a, well, it's not great for your health, but like, that's none of my business phase, which is obviously better than some phases, but not, still not good, and not honestly well informed, which is something that you will learn from this book and from the podcast as well, that there is just a lot of misinformation and a lot of incomplete information, a lot of correlation assuming causation, a lot of treating symptoms as if they are the disease, and just so much. So yes, highly recommend this. The audiobook is narrated by Aubrey, so definitely check it out if you can. And lastly, a little book slash comic kind of thing, The Secret History of Black Punk by Reagan. Sorry, it'll be on the screen. But this is a book that was just put out by a Ohio person, which is very exciting. And this is a kind of an introduction to what is planned to be a series of comics. This was about 60 pages, so it was like a sizable comic or very small book, and it was so cool. I will have some pictures on the screen, but very, very well illustrated and just very interesting. It goes through the kind of history of Black punk, or the development of, you know, rock and roll through punk, post-punk, all kinds of experimental styles. So the beginning is just kind of the background story, and then it goes through a whole bunch of different bands and artists and producers. And yeah, it was very, very cool, very interesting to read. I am not even that into music, and I loved reading it, and I made a whole list of people that I want to look up. So if you are someone who is at all interested in the history of music, I think that this would be a great thing to pick up. You can order it online. I will have the link. But also, there's a short interview from the author of They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us, which is a very, very popular book in, you know, BookTube, Bookstagram, and I did not know that that was coming when I was reading it, and so then I started reading, and I was like, wait a minute, I know this person. I still haven't read that book, but now it's even higher on my list. It was high on my list before, now it is even higher. So, anyway, also an Ohio native, by the way. That was the end of this marathon. So, I am glad that I'm finally caught up, and I never want to skip another month's wrap-up ever again. So, thank you for watching. If you have thoughts on any of these books, or if you have a standout read that you'd like to share from the past couple months, definitely let me know, and I will see you in the next